Delighted to spend a little bit of time with you today on this upcoming keynote with the NOAA leadership. We had a wonderful keynote prior to this with Dr. Jane Lemchenko with OSTP, and now we have a delightful one with our NOAA leadership. We have 5 panelists. I'm going to do a little bit of a bio read. While many of us know our fearless leaders, some of us do not, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to highlight them today. So the first panelist will be Benjamin Friedman. He serves as the Deputy Undersecretary for Operations, currently performing the duties of Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and NOAA Administrator. As the agency's Chief Operating Officer, he is responsible for the day-to-day management of the national and international operations for oceanic and atmospheric services, research, and coastal and marine stewardship. Next panelist is Craig McLean. Craig McLean serves as the Acting NOAA Chief Scientist, the Senior Scientist for the agency providing direction for science and technology priorities. He also serves as the Assistant Administrator for Oceanic and Atmospheric Research. In his role as the OAR Assistant Administrator, he is responsible for overseeing, directing, and implementing NOAA's research enterprise, including a network of research laboratories, and the execution of NOAA programs, including the Climate Program, National Sea Grant College Program, and Ocean Exploration, to name a few. Our next panelist is Dr. Stephen Volz. Steve Volz is now serving as the Acting Assistant Secretary for Environmental Observation and Prediction. He is responsible for all NOAA observing systems, including in situ instruments and satellites, and the process of converting observations to predictions for environmental threats related to weather, climate, water, oceans, and space weather. He also serves as the Assistant Administrator for NOAA's Satellite and Information Service, otherwise known as NESDIS. Dr. Volz has more than 30 years of professional experience in aerospace. He is a leader in the international Earth observation community, serving as the NOAA principal both on the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites and to the Coordinating Group of Meteorological Satellites. Next panelist is Nicole LaBeouf. Nicole is the Acting Assistant Administrator and the Permanent Deputy Assistant Administrator for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Ocean Service, an organization of 1,800 staff in more than 50 locations around the country. As the Acting Assistant Administrator for Ocean Services and Coastal Zone Management at NOAA, Ms. LaBeouf oversees all strategic and operational aspects of America's premier coastal and ocean agency. She provides the strategic vision needed to lead the implementation of activities that supports NOS's priorities of safe and efficient transportation and commerce, preparedness and risk reduction, and stewardship, tourism, and recreation. She serves as the focal point for conveying the value of NOS product services within NOAA and to the Department of Commerce, the Office of Management and Budget, and Congress. Our last panelist is Dr. Louis Uccellini. Dr. Louis Uccellini is NOAA's Assistant Administrator for Weather Services and Director of the National Weather Service, and also permanent U.S. representative at the World Meteorological Organization. In his role, he is responsible for the day-to-day civilian weather operations for the United States, its territories, adjacent waters, and ocean areas. Without further ado, I'd like to bring on Ben Friedman to kick us off. Ben, over to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the AMS Washington Forum for inviting us to speak today. It's kind of like the Oscars last night here on this panel. You have a lot of actors. I am acting in the administrator role. Steve and Nicole are acting in assistant secretary roles. Craig is acting in the chief scientist role. Louis is not acting. He doesn't need to act. Everyone knows who he is, of course, but this is actually fairly typical for a transition. You have careers in acting political roles, and we're all very proud to serve. It's really an exciting time for NOAA right now. We are still going through the Biden transition, and that means there's new personnel and new priorities going on, and we're going to be talking about those. Before we do, though, I did want to make 3 announcements that I know will be of great interest to everyone here. The first is, for those who did not hear, on Friday, the White House announced that Dr. Rick Spinrad will be the next administrator of NOAA. For those who don't know Dr. Spinrad, he is no stranger to NOAA. He was formerly our chief scientist. Formerly as a career, he served as the head of the Ocean Service and head of the research division. And so he's a well-known figure in NOAA, and we're very, very excited to be bringing him back on board and know he's going to hit the ground running, and he's very familiar to us all. The second, I'm sure many of you saw that the president's budget is out for FY22, and NOAA saw a $1.5 billion increase in the president's budget. Currently, we have about a $5.5 billion budget. The president is proposing almost a $7 billion budget for NOAA. We'll have to see what Congress does, but just having the White House support NOAA in this way is fantastic and really is consistent with the promises made by the Biden administration to focus on climate during the course of the next 4 years. And finally, just about an hour ago, NOAA announced that Raytheon Intelligence and Space has been chosen to design and develop the Earth Prediction Innovation Center, or EPIC. I know many of you have probably been following along with EPIC. For those who don't know what it is, it's basically a virtual playground where anybody, the private sector, academia, or really anybody can play with our models. It's kind of a crowdsourcing method of improving our models. This has been a long time in the works, and we're very, very excited about this announcement this morning. Okay, moving back to kind of personnel and priorities of the new Biden administration. Of course, we're seeing some new personnel within the Department of Commerce and at NOAA. Secretary Raimondo came in several weeks ago as the next Secretary of Commerce. She comes to us from Rhode Island, where she was the 75th governor and the first female governor of Rhode Island. We're excited to have the former governor of the Ocean State now being at the Department of Commerce and as our new boss. She's taken a great interest in NOAA already, and it's been a pleasure to have her on board. We currently have 4 politicals at NOAA. Typically, we have about 12 in any administration. The 4 are Karen Hyun is our chief of staff, Walker Smith is our new general counsel, and Latice Lafier and Emily McCullough are 2 policy advisors. And as I mentioned, Dr. Spinrad has now been named as next administrator of NOAA. On policies, I think the policies of the Biden administration have been very well publicized, and many of them impact NOAA directly. Of course, there's a focus on climate, on racial equity, on scientific integrity, and on COVID-19 and the response to COVID-19. Those are all issues that impact NOAA directly. The panel is going to be talking about several of these items, but I did want to highlight 2 before I turn it over. The first is on the racial equity front. There's really 2 parts to this. One is the internal part, what we call diversity and inclusion, diversifying NOAA and making it a more inclusive workplace. The second is externally facing, which is ensuring that our services within NOAA are being provided equitably across the entire country, particularly for those communities that have traditionally been underserved. On that external piece, we're aggressively moving forward. We have a working group that's identifying services and projects and programs that we need to maybe take another look at. This is part of a larger effort by the Department of Commerce to gather these items together and make sure the department as a whole is providing services equitably across the country. So we're moving forward with that. On diversity and inclusion, this is something we've actually been working for years on within NOAA, but the last year we have kind of taken an all hands on deck approach to diversity and inclusion. With the social unrest that happened in the prior year, we decided now's our time to really start pushing our efforts forward. We have a working group that put together an action plan after talking to our employees and external partners and experts. I won't go through the entire action plan here because there's a lot of items on it, but it has everything from ensuring that we have diverse hiring panels to focusing on training for our managers and employees, to really utilizing some programs that we already have in place, like the Educational Partnership Program. And for those who don't know what that is, it's a 20-year-old program that NOAA's had with minority serving institutions across the country, where we provide funding for scholarships and research to these facilities, or to these colleges, to encourage minorities in our sciences. It's been a very impactful program. More than half of the African Americans who've received PhDs in atmospheric sciences have been supported by this program over the last 20 years. Almost 40% of Hispanic Americans who've received PhDs in atmospheric sciences have been supported by this program over the last 20 years. But we haven't always seen those folks coming into NOAA. So we're really focusing our efforts now on attracting that talent into NOAA. to diversify NOAA ranks. We're using new authorities that we have that allow us to do direct hire out of our fellowship and internship programs instead of the traditional competitive process. And so we're matching those two things together, bringing in interns and fellows from these minority serving institutions with the hope of giving them offers when they graduate. So a lot of exciting things going on there. And then finally, I'll just say briefly on COVID-19. I think NOAA was ahead of the game in many ways in our response to COVID-19. We saw it coming. We are an agency full of scientists. And so we've taken a very data-driven approach to our response to COVID, trying to keep everyone safe. Despite that, we still have had over 600 positive cases within NOAA and unfortunately 4 deaths. But despite that, we are continuing to do everything we can to keep our workforce safe. And our real focus now is on bringing our workforce back safely to a work environment. I know this is something that everyone is working on, the private sector, other agencies, we're all working on it. We're working on policies. I think it's fair to say, though, that in the future at NOAA, there's going to be a lot more flexibilities in our workforce, including increased telework and potentially even remote work where folks are working full-time from areas around the country. So we're looking at those things just like everyone else. And over the next several months, we plan to implement some new policies allowing for more flexibilities. So I'll just sum up by saying, obviously, there's a lot of challenges going on right now within NOAA between climate change, between racial equity issues and COVID. But it's also just an incredible time of excitement in NOAA. We're ready for that challenge and look forward to facing it. And with that, I will turn it over to Craig McLean.
Thank you, Ben, and good day to everyone who's joining in here. Thank you to AMS for once again providing this forum. Well, it's a great opportunity to be talking about additional subjects, but I'm going to start right where Ben left off and to remind us that the executive orders that have been distributed and issued by the president, as well as his presidential memoranda, have really given a boost to the mission space that we've been in. I think, as you may recall, weather had been supported because really everyone is concerned about the weather. And we didn't have any erosion in the president's budget to a great extent in the past administration. But we look forward to the president's budget details coming out where we could be explaining in greater detail where the $1.4 billion increase is going. But we certainly have a strong weather program. We certainly have a strong climate program. And we also have a strong ocean program. And I do want to talk about all three because I think each of those three make up the strength of what NOAA's scientific offering is for the public. So let me start with climate for a moment here and to realize that as the nation begins a greater focus on climate science, and as the president has described it, addressing the climate crisis, the information that NOAA has been providing for the past 50 years is really, really the foundation of what we know. Now, you may take exception to that, but bear with me. If you go back 50 years when NOAA was first created, first of all, we are the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. But secondly, a piece of NOAA, not the Weather Service, not the Coast Survey, not the Fishery Service, but Oceans and Atmospheric Research, if you read the Stratton Commission report from 1969 and 70, it declares that we're going to create a piece of this new Ocean and Atmospheric Agency to study the interplay between oceans and atmospheres. And we've done that. We built the observing system, both in the water and in the atmosphere, and with the assistance of satellites. We have a comprehensive and complete observing system. We have ships that we built for these purposes. We have global oceanographic campaigns that we have led and executed for these purposes. And after 50 years of oceans and atmospheric study, what we come to find is climate science. And the people who have defined climate science, as you look back at the history, they were not necessarily climate scientists. I don't think that discipline really existed 50 or 40 years ago. What they were atmospheric chemists, physicists, modelers, oceanographers, and the like. So we really have built, and we have seen built, with academic colleagues and support and alongside of us, with support from other agencies like NASA, Navy, we've been able to see climate science really built. But now we're at the point where the science tells us what we need to know. The policy debates will continue, and that's always the domain of the policy debate. But the debate on climate science is over, long over, and we know we need to act because the science is sufficiently informing us. So we're very pleased with the position that we find ourselves in as the president has called NOAA on certain service elements to be providing information and services to the public and to sustain our science. So we enjoy doing that. We also do know and also do enjoy conducting a lot of this work in partnership with many other federal agencies. But in particular, I want to highlight our academic colleagues in the cooperative institutes and those academic institutions that we routinely work with very closely, where we come to find that about 50% of our science complement are university employees. The other half are NOAA employees. At least that is true inside of Oceans and Atmospheric Research. So with our Argo program, our Tropical Pacific Observing program, even a budding and hopeful Arctic observing system that may be developed, we're realizing that the observations are really driving both weather and climate. We've done so comprehensively, and we will continue to do so. In terms of our atmospheric observations, which once again can feed into our better understanding of weather, and weather, of course, weather times time equals climate, we can see how our atmospheric observation will be relied upon as basically the telltale of the success of mitigation that we might undertake with climate. So what is good for climate is also good for weather. What's good for weather is also good for climate. I'll just point out recently that there was a detected escape of CFC-11 coming from Eastern Asia, and with triangulation and cooperation of international partners, but largely the work that was done on top of Mauna Loa and the observations that were measured there, we were able to detect the origin area. And once notified, the government of China was responsive and started to bring that level of escapement of gas under control. So these detection devices that we've got in situ on land, in some cases at high elevation, but have really been able to tell us discreetly in a very investigative sort of way just what's going on globally. We're very proud of the success we've had with our climate models. I know that increasingly the GFDL global climate model is the reference being used internationally for the performance of all other models. We're also very proud of the FV3 dynamical core that's in the global forecast system that the Weather Service is using operationally, and also the high resolution rapid refresh model that is giving us really neighborhood or county scale storm predictions in and around the continental United States. So we're looking forward to seeing this level of engagement and leadership and use of product enhancing the commercial weather industry. But as the commercial weather industry starts to or continues to move into the provision of climate relevant services, I just want to point out the important point of data reliability and information reliability. Not all models are good for every aspect, and it's important to understand where that information is usable, useful, and appropriately guided. So that's something else that NOAA is engaged in and plans to stay engaged in, is helping to inform the community as to where the integrity is of which models for what purpose, in order to be providing, I'm sure, what will be widely sought advice on climate futures. Let me touch on oceans now for a second here. You've heard me say before, and I want to thank my good friend Louis Uccellini, as Louis is in the World Meteorological Organization as the US representative. He flattered me greatly because he actually quoted me on the floor of the WMO for my saying that if you like your 7-day weather forecast, thank an oceanographer. I don't for a minute forsake the talent and the dedication of the Weather Service forecasters who have actually kept me safe when I was spending my time as the captain of NOAA ships. I lived on their forecasts. But if you look at the importance of ocean measurements and how they interplay and feed into weather forecasts, my bumper sticker of if you like your 7 days is really not inaccurate. And the point I make here is to invite the larger weather community through WMO, through AMS, and through NOAA to be increasingly mindful of the importance of oceanography in looking at global weather, which is giving us, as we start to go from subseasonal to seasonal, that level of information across that time frame that is vital to make the kind of forecasts that every component of our constituency, whether they be public sector, private, or citizenry, that's what people are looking for. So bringing more of oceanography into the discussion with meteorology is an engagement or intersection of two different cultures. And I think the more we can be open and embracing each other, the better we will be doing. Probably the best example I could offer is how just the nascent and early indications of upper ocean heat that was detected by the likes of Scott Glenn, our colleague up in Rutgers University, in looking at not just sea surface temperature, but the top 50 meters of ocean, and the importance of that in looking at the intensity increase or degradation in tropical storms and hurricanes. So it's a question of broadening our scope for what data we're looking for. So with that, I'll also offer that the ocean-going component is something that we're focusing on here. We have fleet construction underway. We're very proud of that. These are very useful and necessary scientific tools, just as our atmospheric observations are and our ocean subsea observations are, so are our ships. And we're in the process of getting new ships constructed. We're grateful for that, but I would offer that we don't have enough sea days and we don't have enough funding for sea days in order to reach everything that we need to reach. We also don't have the funding that we need to fulfill the Weather Act, the Weather Forecast and Innovation, Weather Research Forecast and Innovation Act. So we're hopeful to see that with new opportunities in the new administration, the budgets and the numbers that you see in broad categories can be discerned in more refined categories and see some further success for our mission there. A quick note, Ben had mentioned the EPIC Award. I want to congratulate the Raytheon team for their selection, but I also want to recognize that that program will be run out of OAR's Weather Program Office, where we've recently selected, and today is the first day, for Dorothy Koch, who will be the director of the Weather Program Office. Congratulations, Dorothy. And we're very grateful to the Weather Service because Dorothy came over from National Weather Service, and before that she was at the Department of Energy doing excellent work in the modeling world as well. It goes without saying that we're deeply indebted to Russ Schneider, who is going back to his work at the Forecast Center in Norman, Oklahoma, having served in that Weather Program Office role. But Russ has been an absolute champion for us, and we really appreciate the work that he and Louis, by his grace, has given us the opportunity to have a very rich exchange of people between OAR and the Weather Service. Last, I'll mention scientific integrity, which is something that's on my portfolio as the acting chief scientist. We have completed and posted the updated version of the NOAA Scientific Integrity Policy as the result of the comments that came from the National Academy of Public Administration during the transgressions of the last administration, and we have implemented those in our policy in our NOAA administrative order. We're currently looking to modest changes that deal with equity and other types of opportunities in the science integrity policy, and that should be completed in a month or thereabouts. And we will be up to date with where the president's admonitions and encouragement in scientific integrity have been made. And I have to say, we're quite proud of the fact that that which is in the president's memorandum on scientific integrity really is very much a mirror of what NOAA has been doing for quite some time. And we're proud of the position we have on scientific integrity in this agency and the ways that we choose to enforce it. So with that, I am content to conclude my remarks. And I'll probably make an error here, but Steve, I think you're next. Is that right?
That's right, Craig. Thank you. So I want to say thank you to Craig, and thank you to for the opportunity to speak to this panel about this very important topic, addressing the climate challenge and climate crisis. I'm going to share my my perspective both as the head of NOAA's Satellite Information Service, or NESDIS, and as the acting secretary for all of NOAA's observation and prediction systems. Others have already pointed out that while climate is thankfully enjoying the full focused attention of the government today, we have been basically in the climate and environmental observations, information, and services business for generations at NOAA. And the impact of our work is now more relevant to our public policy than ever before. In the past, many have focused on how our output serves primarily near real-time and short-term weather forecasts, but our information and our model forecasts have always been contained significant value for longer-term planning, preparation for all sorts of infrastructure and other elements of building and design. These three elements of NOAA, the observing systems we have in place, the organizational focus on assessment and understanding of Earth phenomena, and the communication and dissemination systems and services that we have together provide a very tried and true approach, which is already delivering climate and weather and environmental services to the nation and to the world, in fact, in many places. But speaking as the lead of the observing systems for the NOAA, I'll say these systems provide a framework to address the climate challenge, but across the board, we need to do more to really meet that challenge. And Craig alluded to that a little bit before about additional investments, and I'll talk a little bit more of that from the observing system side. To meet this challenge well, NOAA must really provide a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of how all these different complex Earth environmental factors and systems work together. Dr. Lubchenco mentioned before about the value and the critical essential nature of whole Earth systems analysis and understanding. We really require a robust, state-of-the-art global observing system and expanded research for oceans, land, atmosphere, and sun to monitor and model all these different physical, chemical, and biological features and how they work together of our world. And I will say again that NOAA, we've been working for the last 5 years on a definition and initiation of really what I will call wholesale observing systems upgrade to meet the challenge. As Craig mentioned a moment ago, speaking first to the fleet, the NOAA fleet, we completed an overall NOAA fleet recapitalization review around 2016 and started off on a regular refresh and rebuild or new build of vessels. We have the first 2 vessels under contract, and the first, the Oceanographer, a 230 to 40 foot vessel, is expected to be commissioned somewhere around 2024, with additional ships emerging every couple of years on a steady cadence after that to refresh and expand the NOAA fleet. We've completed around 2018 a comprehensive satellite observing systems architecture study and are now implementing the next generation of satellites now informed by the findings of that study. These implementations include, from a geostationary perspective, the definition and initiation of GeoXO, the geostationary follow-on to GOES-R. And in that program, we'll be delivering ocean and atmospheric composition observations from GEO in a significant way for the first time. It's really a whole of NOAA observing system. For space weather, we're starting up an operational space weather observing system, working in parallel with our longstanding research and emerging international operational partners to do that. And from low Earth orbit, we're developing the first disaggregated low Earth orbit operational constellation approach that will include NOAA assets alongside a significant enhancement of our assimilation of the wealth of all the other LEO satellites in orbit, from our research partners such as JAXA, ESA, and NASA, and our operational partners such as EUMETSAT, Copernicus, Indian Space Agency, JMA, and many others. Really a whole global observing system. And on the in situ and others, we are focusing on a similar assessment of the ocean and land in situ observing systems, both those buoys and those land measurements that are critical to the whole system. This wealth of new observations will enable new research and support improved modeling of the interconnected Earth system, which is really needed to understand the changing world. And output from these models leads directly to improved information as well as enhanced climate and environmental services that we've been asked to support and the nation needs. Just as one example, we know the ocean is a major driver of regional climate variability, and we also know that augmenting NOAA's ocean observing fleet system with more buoys and more days at sea, as Greg mentioned, and pairing these data with capable global satellite system will really help NOAA understand how the ocean influences climate and how climate influences the ocean. I'll speak a little bit to the data sharing side of the house. We share this observing space with many partners. We recognize that. It's not just NOAA looking at all these data. It's federal, academic, commercial, and international partners in the same space. These other agencies, many federal agencies, state and local governments, and businesses, are looking to NOAA to understand how they can adapt and respond to climate change and provide science-based services to their constituencies. We're not the last service provider. We're providing sometimes intermediate data. NOAA, working with our cooperative institutes, with NASA, the USGS, and the global observing community, can really meet this challenge as being that trusted source where the data come together and then distribute to the communities. With our commitment to the communities and with direction from the states, we really think we can help provide the essential nature of this information to the larger community. On the topic of the commercial sector, space-based commercial data, NOAA has led the way amongst US government agencies and our international partners in piloting and making operational use of data from commercial providers, setting a precedent on key issues such as data sharing and quantifying the impact of the data. As you buy a new data set and you introduce it to the system, how important, how impactful is that individual data set? NOAA is coordinating with EUMETSAT as they are also developing similar plans for commercial radio occultation data. And we understand that the global system has been carefully defined over the years, data sharing protocols that have worked well for those years. We're being very thoughtful of how we bring this commercial data into that mix so that we don't disrupt a working system, but add to it and improve the overall performance. Just as we are right now, with the commercial data, the price points for these data are still fluid. The whole business model of how commercial observations can be made profitable for the vendors as well as useful for the users such as we are. And NESDIS is working with NOAA using our first 2-year operational purchase to better understand impact and pricing and the cost versus benefit trades that we need to assess as we be a smart buyer of data for the world, for the country. On the reliability side, as you all know, we're the nation's 24/7 provider of foundational environmental information. At the National Centers for Environmental Information, or NCEI, we house those in the environmental archives for the nation, and we make them available. Our work includes both long-term environmental observations, data collection, and research to daily operational forecasts and management of all the oceans and coastal resources. And we really are responsible for providing this best-in-class data and information in a way that's useful and accessible to the communities. As the volume and breadth of the information we collect and house expands, we're going to be increasingly challenged on how to distribute this information quickly, efficiently, and in formats that users can use and rely on. So we're working right now in a bunch of ways to leverage the capabilities of the cloud for multiple aspects of our service delivery, including both satellite data processing at the front end of the data value chain, and also data and information dissemination on the back end to make sure that we can reach to all the many users who are interested in getting our data. We're also experimenting and expanding how best to use cloud-native tools and processes. Epic is an example, in a sense, from what Craig just mentioned, where we have a sandbox or a playground where the community can come to our model and play with it and understand what its features are. We expect to use these processes as well as AI and machine learning to better exploit and share the data of our data for others to use. We're not where we need to be in terms of whole earth data and information integration, but we see that as clearly the target we're after. And we're working across NOAA systems and services to get to that point. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Nicole LaBeouf, the acting director of the National Ocean Service. Over to you, Nicole.
All right, thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on your location. I am Nicole LaBeouf, Acting Assistant Administrator of NOAA's National Ocean Service, and I am pleased to be with you today. As we all well know, extreme weather and climate events are projected to worsen in intensity, duration, and frequency over the coming decades. As Steve and I told the House Appropriations Committee just 2 weeks ago, the United States has experienced $1.7 trillion worth of damage from weather and climate disasters since 1980, and the rate at which these events are happening is accelerating. Coastal storms, flooding, and sea level rise, for example, are all destabilizing threats to our coastal communities and industries, including those that make up our marine economy, also known as our blue economy. Given that AMS is focusing a portion of this forum on the blue economy, I'd like to first offer some thoughts on how a healthy blue economy is essential to helping our nation achieve our economic recovery and long-term stability. Our nation's blue economy, made up of multiple sectors within our coastal zone, is an indispensable source of jobs, innovation, and our nation's overall economic well-being, and its relative contribution is growing. From natural gas to sneakers, from medical supplies to bananas, to budding new industries like offshore wind and aquaculture, we absolutely rely on our coasts and our coastal infrastructure and our ocean-based economic sectors to provide the foundation for many aspects of our nation's economy and our way of life. It's nearly impossible for most of us to go a single day without eating, wearing, or using items that come either from or through our ports, ocean, or coastal communities. And when it comes to our nation's blue economy, NOAA's authoritative data and decision support enables stability and even growth in a rapidly changing world. And this benefits pretty much everyone. Okay, enough about the blue economy, but my point is that the coast and the ocean are very important. And you may be thinking, yeah, well, we know this. And I have no doubt, as has been mentioned, that you're aware of ocean warming and the importance of ocean temperature to the intensification of tropical cyclones. And yet I might suggest that this community as a whole has only begun to dip its toes in the water. It is a choice to stand at the water's edge and look out upon the ocean and tell ourselves that it is a boundary. In fact, those of us who live on large continents typically do. But if you ask Indigenous islanders from Hawaii to Samoa to New Zealand, if the ocean is a boundary, they will tell you that it is not. They will tell you that it is a vital connector of people and of processes. And I would say there is wisdom in this Indigenous thinking. So let us not feign surprise as we discover that our ocean is much more than a boundary condition when it comes to weather and climate events. As our understanding of the interconnectedness of Earth's processes improves, I have no doubt that the ocean will reveal itself as a linchpin, as the connector, and as a profound modulator of the Earth's rapid changes. So let us not spend these next precious months and years tentatively standing at the water's edge, wondering whether we can swim. To make the connections needed to advance our understanding of the Earth as a system in time to truly adapt to climate change, we must wade right in and start paddling. I strongly encourage AMS and this community to better recognize the study of the world's ocean as a significant force in our Earth's expression of weather and of climate change. And I challenge AMS to be a stronger facilitator of interdisciplinary ocean atmosphere discussions to help provide a better understanding of coastal and oceanographic contributions to the weather enterprise, and to encourage the necessary inclusion of the ocean during our nation's reinvigorated focus on climate change. I invite AMS and its members to work with Steve, Louis, Craig, and myself and our teams to identify tangible next steps so that we can accurately capture the ocean's role in influencing our weather and our climate patterns, as well as perhaps its changing capacity to do so. Sure, at NOS, ocean is our middle name, and so perhaps my bias is showing, although I would note that I'm the third in line today to raise the issue of the influence on the ocean on weather and climate. There is expertise in this area across NOAA, and we look forward to your call. Speaking of climate change, my NOAA colleagues and I have been thinking a lot about NOAA's role in delivering climate services to help our nation predict and address its impacts. We know that NOAA's data and information supports a worldwide weather and climate enterprise that has grown into a $7 billion industry. And we know that NOAA personnel are world leaders in generating and delivering climate impact information and prediction using state-of-the-art coastal, marine, terrestrial, aerial, and space-based observing platforms. Through timely delivery of trusted information and climate services, NOAA saves lives, protects property, and increases community resilience by helping businesses, decision makers, and everyday people across the country. By authority and by design, NOAA is unique among federal agencies in that we not only study and monitor, but we also predict, forecast, conserve, manage, train, deliver, and listen. NOAA's unique mandate is to produce climate science and to ensure that the science is understood and useful to stakeholders. I like to say that at NOAA, we turn information into insight and insight into action. It is because of NOAA's call to service that our climate-related observations, modeling, and expertise are more important than ever as we adapt to climate change impacts and start the long process of economic recovery. Of course, as with most things, NOAA cannot deliver a full suite of essential climate sciences and services alone. Collaborative and innovative modeling and predictive capabilities are critical to our adaptation to climate change, whether these activities are being carried out by industry, academia, or by the federal government. NOAA works directly with end users, including first responders, the agricultural sector, floodplain managers, and tribal nations, to ensure that the climate science and services NOAA produces are both useful and used. And NOAA is forging new ties with real estate, finance, and health professionals, to name a few. NOAA's work to improve communication of risk, including sea level rise and hurricane forecasts, saves lives and millions of dollars by enabling risk-informed decision-making by state and local officials. In underserved, often rural communities, NOAA's technical assistance, extension services, and on-the-ground partnerships support communities especially vulnerable to natural hazards. NOAA also works with the private sector within the weather and climate enterprise in the creation of new science and services, and with business in the development of technology to measure and model climate change, and in the communication of climate services to stakeholders. NOAA's partnership with AMS is crucial to how we deliver climate science and services, such as through the annual State of the Climate report in the bulletin of the AMS. With regard to the federal family, NOAA deeply values its federal agency partnerships and is poised to serve as a convening partner and as an expert resource in the applied climate science and services we need for the American people. NOAA gratefully acknowledges our partnership with AMS, as well as our academic partners, federal and state agency, private sector, and everyone here today. In closing, I'd like to thank AMS for inviting us all here today as we come to grips with the fact that we are now living in a time defined by change. Your interest in collaboration across NOAA acknowledges the rightfully broad definition of the word meteorological and sets a forward-leaning tone for how we must consider the task at hand. By more closely coupling AMS's work with that of a growing ocean-observing enterprise, you will afford this community the opportunity to enhance its understanding of the impacts of climate change on a significant contributor to American lives and livelihood, the blue economy. And in doing so, you will arm us all with the foundational insights into our ocean's profound role in shaping weather and climate-related events now and into the future. For that, thank you, AMS, for your leadership. Thank you for having me today. And now I'd like to turn the mic over to my Weather Service colleague, Louis Uccellini.
Thank you, Nicole. And actually, I want to thank all my colleagues here in NOAA that have shared with you how we are working together. Phenomena I've termed Team NOAA. We are literally blowing apart the stovepipes. And I think this is really important as we address the priorities of the Biden administration, the changing climate, and obviously its effects on extreme events like weather and water events especially, and what's going on in the oceans and along the coast, and the social, racial equity for the services we provide to all communities, especially the underserved. What I would like to do in the brief time that I have is just touch upon 4 programmatic aspects and 2 probably more tactical. Number 1, we are building off the ongoing efforts to transform our services through our partnerships with many of you in all components of AMS to reach every community every day as we work to build a weather-ready nation, including serving the underserved, the traditionally underserved, the tribal nations, the Alaska Native communities, the Southwest Pacific island states, Hispanic communities along the southern border. I can tell you that our field structure of the WFOs, the River Forecast Centers, the national centers, all been working together to serve these communities. And I'm really proud of what they've already accomplished. But we also recognize we have a long way to go. And there are aspects of the poor rural communities and especially the urban communities that really need to be addressed. And we are already organizing ourselves within these NOAA efforts that you've already heard about to do that. Furthermore, we are working with NOAA to conduct vulnerability assessments through a social science lens, particularly directed towards severe weather impacts across the United States. Again, there are major gaps that need to be addressed in that regard. And we are listening to the increased demand for improved subseasonal to seasonal predictions and links to extreme droughts, fire, and floods that impact much of the country. Now, with respect to the more tactical aspects and that we're working on that I believe are an interest to all of you, we are on schedule now with respect to our upgrade to our new computing system, where the primary and the backup computers will each be increased to nearly 12 and a half petaflop systems. We are scheduled to accept these systems in the midsummer. And at that point, the rapid spate of implementations that I hope you've all noticed will cease its so-called moratorium as we transfer all of our code over to the new computing systems. That should start in the midsummer period. The other aspect that we are working towards is the dissemination systems. We're upgrading our dissemination system. In fact, we're accelerating the upgrade of the dissemination system based in part on the extra support we got through the fiscal year 21 budget. There's a real effort to address the bandwidth issues, to update the hardware, like the routers, for example, and to accelerate our experimentation with cloud systems to address the many issues that I know that you folks are aware of, following a plan that we're working through over the next several years to really solidify and make the dissemination process for the National Weather Service the system that everybody wants. And to focus on not only the distribution of the high voluminous data sets, such as the model output that we provide, but also enhance the interaction within the Weather Service and with our partners throughout the enterprise, and those that are actually affecting decisions on the ground to save lives and property. So those are ongoing. And finally, you heard the announcement on EPIC today from Ben. I view this as a historic opportunity for us to engage the larger community in the development and improvements of all of our operational models. And we have embraced this even before we got to the point of formally establishing EPIC. We've been in a process of engaging the model community through a community approach, the Unified Forecast System on GitHub, which there's already an active number of people involved from throughout the enterprise and throughout our education system, actually. This is on GitHub, and already looking at the code suggestions and improvements that are coming through there. And this is already being supported through EMC as we move forward. So, there'll be much more on that with this EPIC support increasing, that we are committed to engage the larger research and academic communities and those in the private sector who are also working with us in many ways, even on assessing and commenting on not only the modeling systems, but the dissemination systems that we've just talked about. So really looking to that part of our development efforts under the new administration. I just would like to make a few quick comments with respect to the WMO. I think many of you are aware of the change that's ongoing in the WMO, the transformation to two technical commissions based on the basically the weather, water, climate linkage, the Earth System Science approach with a real focus on the atmosphere, ocean, land hydrology, the polar cryosphere combination within the Earth System Science, and how those interactions all need to be accounted for, not only in our observing systems and modeling, but also in the way we provide the services across the around the world, actually. I just want to note that an aspect of this that I've been involved in involves, and Craig alluded to it, I'm a co-chair of an effort to affect the transformation from the JCOM to a joint collaboration board between the ocean and atmospheric community. And we've accomplished that. We have established a joint collaboration board across the entire value chain, from observation, data management, services, the science research, and capacity building. To me, this is a clear illustration of the importance, not only within NOAA and not only within the United States, all the agencies that are related to those four fundamental components, but around the globe to address the many challenges that are associated with applying this Earth System Science framework to improving our forecasts, improving our services, and improving the capacity development in response to the increasing extreme events that are affecting everybody. So that is ongoing. The other aspect of this, and something that I've learned and seen now firsthand in the data observations and data management, as we approach the discussions and the establishment, the discussions on Resolution 40 and the establishment of a new resolution, it's these efforts that we've been associated with since the mid-90s in the access, the open access to essential data by not only the operational communities, but also by the research communities, the academic communities, is going to become even more important and perhaps more difficult. But we are working towards the extraordinary Congress this year to debate this new resolution, and whether it gets done at this Congress or the next Congress 2 years from now. I can assure you that the United States and other countries are taking the position of upholding the main tenet of unrestricted access to data required for the NWP and other research endeavors. So we're working on that. And the last aspect of the WMO that should be of interest to everybody is the declaration, the public-private sector declaration that came out of the last Congress, which is providing a welcoming entry, I'd say, into the discussions of how the public-private sectors can work together around the globe to establish a level playing field, which was a main issue that we brought to the table in this declaration. And I can report out that it's already having beneficial effects in some places around the globe, including Europe. So I'll leave it at that in the spirit of time. I just again want to thank everyone for allowing me a chance to speak with you at the end of this, what you can see as a collaborative effort amongst all the NOAA leaders as we work together and address the many challenges and opportunities that face us. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. I now invite all of our panelists to come on up and start your video again. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. And Nicole, you really resonated with the interdisciplinary challenge of moving from water's edge to wading in and paddling. There have been a group of us for a long time that have argued the importance of that interconnection between atmosphere and ocean. So very excited and very appreciative. I do invite folks to go ahead and provide their chat in the chat feature. I do have one that has come in from Rick Rosen. What do workforce shortages look like in each of the line offices? What steps, aside from Ben's mentioning of hiring graduates of MSIs, minority serving institutes, are possible to rebuild your workforces? And that's for anybody.
So I think I can jump in, at least initially answer and say that I don't think it's a secret that over the last several years we have struggled to hire within NOAA, and there's a whole set of reasons why that's true. I won't go into them. It's complicated. If it was easy, we would have solved it a long time ago. The good news is that last year we hired almost 1,700 people. That's the most people we've hired in over a decade. And this year we're on track to hire a significant number as well. So I'm not saying we've won this battle because there still is a ways to go and we're still struggling in some areas, but we're starting to see some advancement in hiring. We also do have these new authorities that were provided to us by Congress a couple years ago that allow us to do direct hires in certain science fields and also to do direct hires out of many of our fellowship and internship programs. So that's really given us a boost as well. So while, again, we're not claiming victory, we are starting to turn the corner. And we fully recognize that if we get a big boost in budget, we're going to have to do some serious hiring. And so we're starting to prepare for that.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to respond? We're good?
Yeah, I
Okay.
would. If I just add one comment to that, it's not just filling in open billets. As we look to greater integrated Earth observations analysis, greater use of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and answering questions in a different way, we really are looking to hire a different type of, in addition to replacing open billets, hiring a different type of engineer and scientist who is really, I speak as a NESDIS person here, as the data analytics side of the house. And Louis and Craig could speak to the modeling side. We really are looking for expansion in those capabilities, and the next generation than mine, probably skip a couple, are really going to be necessary as we look to what we're going to look like in 10 years. Is going to be a very different workforce than we might have had 10 years ago.
I'll jump in behind Steve and agree full on. If we consider how much time we've spent discussing the migration into, let's say, cloud computing, which is an existing technology, it's an existing procurement mechanism, I would offer we've not spent enough time looking at where we need to go with exascale computing. And by the time that architecture is more available, what are the skills that are going to be necessary in the workforce in order to be dealing with exascale compute, which is different than what we have today. So there are a number of areas, to Dr. Rosen's question, that we can look and see where the future has already gotten at least a sketch of the chart that we're going to have to follow to navigate our way into the future. And I want to commend the Cooperative Institute community because they're being very attentive to what these skills are that should be taught and developed, and they will one day be adding to the benefit of our workforce. But I want to also add to that the cooperative science centers, which are part of our minority serving educational partnership program office, that there is more than enough room and there's an open invite to be bringing the cooperative science centers full on into this whole discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, and we are a science-based service organization, and from a science perspective, we heard a lot about the Earth system science component that is looming large already, and will form the basis for how we bring all this together. But there's also the social science, and I could link that to the service part of it because we are connecting with decision makers outside of our realm, right? Emergency managers, public safety officials, water resource managers, who have changing risk preferences, especially in the face of these extreme events, and are pushing the envelope, by the way, of how far out in time they want the information. So we got to deal with this deep uncertainty issue as we're advising the initial run-up of decisions as an extreme, especially as an extreme event approaches. All this has ramifications for the people we need to hire into the future. And I contend the number of people, I don't think it's going to go down, as Steve has alluded to. We got a lot, or Ben, maybe it was you, but we got a lot more work to do in that regard at every level of government, federal, state, and local, where most of the decisions are made. So we've got a lot of work to do throughout our entire field structure. And I think this is an area where the pie is already growing and it's going to continue. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next question, trying to get one more in before we end. Does NOAA leadership see new or renewed collaboration with other parts of Commerce Department? U.S. Census, NIST, whatnot. Have you guys seen that?
So again, I'll just quickly jump in and say that I think there is that sense, and actually a lot of that's come with the new administration. We are trying to make connections with other parts of the agency and figure out how we can kind of work with each other. I think particularly in areas like climate, like the blue economy, these are areas where we can play across commerce. Sometimes, the different bureaus of commerce don't always mesh well together. But I think in certain areas like these, we're starting to see advancement. And I know Secretary Raimondo has spoken to this and is very eager to kind of make these connections.
Yeah, I'll just add, in addition to the blue economy, which I'm familiar with, that we're working on with other bureaus, we're also working with them on environmental justice issues. Various bureaus across the department have interests, expertise, as well as data that can inform our decisions about where environmental injustice is taking place, where we can improve things for them. And there is a renewed interest in screening for environmental justice with a climate resilience lens. And so this is an area I see of growth for better collaboration across the bureaus at the Department of Commerce. And I'm really hopeful that we can together give even more than NOAA even could alone. But thank you for that question.
Well, folks, it is 2:15, if you can believe that. This is a very quick 1 hour. I'm incredibly indebted to the 5 of you for taking your time today. I think it was a robust conversation with folks, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you so very much. We will come back at 2:30 for the Addressing Our Wildland Fire Weather Needs, and look forward to some incredible sessions this afternoon. Thank you all so very much.